Hey everyone, I'm Saskia and welcome to Lesbian Visibility Week events. How exciting! Have you been enjoying your week so far? Today, I am talking to some amazing women, people who are playing a big part in pride, in representation and visibility. And also I want to hear, their stories about being out and proud lesbian women and how their experiences have been through their journey. So today's Pride is Pride Women. And that's our panel event. We have three fabulous women who are representing the LGBTQ plus Pride events from their perspective as well. So without further ado, I'm just going to introduce your first name. And then if you'd like to just give us a bit of an introduction about yourself and your connection to Pride. So let me start over here. First person, and in no particular order, Helen.
Hi. Helen, I'm a director of Milton Keynes Pride. We're a relatively new Pride, quite small, about 10, 15,000, so quite a local community Pride.
Oh, fabulous stuff there. And Olga.
Hi, my name is Olga. So I'm part of National Student Pride for the second year this year. And obviously it's changed very much so from the last year. So very different, but I used to look after outreach and now look after social media and researching the Rainbow Panel.
Oh, that's exciting. The Rainbow Panel, you have to tell me a bit more about that going forward. And last but not least, Maya, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. My name is Maya, everyone's she, her, and I work as a project officer for sports and human rights at Copenhagen 2021, which is of course the joint celebration of Euro Games and World Pride this summer in Copenhagen. Yes.
There we go, fabulous. So listen, let's start off. It is Lesbian Visibility Week that we've been celebrating. It's been a great week, great response. But I just want to ask you, what does lesbian visibility mean to you personally? Let me start. Olga, tell me about yourself.
Sorry, my name you said, right? I didn't hear. For me, visibility, well, I think it's everywhere. And for me, it starts from what I know best, which is social media and media in general. So for me, visibility means seeing people like me everywhere, portrayed in the right way, not overly stereotyped, not always stories tragically ending, but just happy couples living their lives, and seeing those kind of same rom-coms and those kind of stories. That's what I want to see more. That's my kind of aspiration, just normalizing the relationships and, carving out the space, because we really don't have, unfortunately, sometimes enough representation within the community and more so in mainstream as well. But yeah.
A quick question on that then, because I know obviously you do social media for Student Pride as well. In terms of social media, because that plays a massive part within, creating visibility as well. Do you still struggle? Do you think in terms of, when you think about audience reach, when you're posting and you're putting your social media out there, do you have to kind of make sure that is there a certain criteria of social media, if you like, that you kind of have to put out there? Obviously, we want to create more visibility, but what's it like in terms of thinking, will that post actually get enough reach for this whole project? You see what I mean? How do you kind of get around that for visibility?
Do you mean in terms of the reach of those kind of marginalized group within the community? So yeah. That's it's an ongoing issue, as you said. Unfortunately, prides, there is a lot of stereotypes around prides. They're seen as a white gay male, and a lot of straight women and a lot of straight people in general coming to party. So it's losing the kind of the roots from where it started, where it was female-led, it was trans female-led as well, and POC people were absolutely played absolutely crucial part in it. So it feels like we kind of gone a bit too far from it. So yes, it is really important to reach the audiences that are kind of disregarded most of the time. And it definitely is a problem because there's a lot of stereotypes, and sometimes people don't even want to come to those events because they feel like, oh, there's no place for me. So a lot of women and a lot of lesbian women or a lot of trans people just don't feel comfortable coming to certain events. So we are trying to change that. We're trying to change the structure all the time. It's always evolving, always changing, of the actual committee, of the event. We're like, trying to adapt depending on circumstances. And we always try to have the speakers who represent everyone in the community. So instead of, as you mentioned before, instead of segregating, instead of making like defragmentalizing the community, we're trying to bring everyone together, but have every voice heard. I think that's very important. So everyone should come together, but everyone should be heard, because the issues are very different, especially if it's an intersectionality, like if you are a lesbian and also Black lesbian, if you're a trans person and also a lesbian. So if you have more than one kind of identity within the community, it's even harder. So we're trying to cater for everyone, but it's a learning curve. Of course, we don't always get things right, and we're always learning, but it's just part of the process, I think.
Yeah, no, that's it. And we'll touch more on that, as further along in the discussion as well. Helen, I know that you also are what we call LGBTQ+ queer business owner as well. In terms of visibility and representation and your own story, how important is that to you?
It's really important, and I think from kind of backstory, up in the 80s in London, and it was very much the time that literally I couldn't see lesbian women anywhere, and apart from the gravestone advertisements that were happening at the time, if you were gay, you were going to die type thing that was happening. It was a really scary time, and I had nothing to identify to. So visibility is, really, really important to me. What I tend to find is a mixture of lesbian visibility and sexism combined is something that experience quite a lot in the genres of work that we do, and it can be quite challenging at times, but it's the same as Olga said about the fact is, if you do have capacity, like my G work and things like that, you have capacity to show that you can be a happy, healthy adult as a lesbian, and it happens, it's real, people are successful and they do have happy lives, and I would totally agree with that. And that's part of why I try to be, particularly in our practice and what we do, really, really inclusive, that it is a safe space for everybody, but also being able to role model where possible.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? It's interesting. Albert was talking there about intersectionality, and then you mentioned you experiencing sexism as well as being lesbian, maybe homophobia, lesphobia as well. And there is always constantly some barrier that has to be overcome. You think you kind of got the visibility, and then there's something else that we have to kind of work on, which is really frustrating. Overall, isn't it? Thank that, Helen. Maya, also want to speak to you because obviously with World Pride, you're coming from, as much as it's your personal journey, but you're kind of representing World Pride on a larger scale as well. But in terms of what lesbian visibility means to you, tell us more about that.
Well, I gotta agree with Olga on just seeing lesbians in a non-stereotypical way, seeing the broad of the community, that it's not just the stereotypical lesbian that we see often portrayed in shows or movies, but actually seeing the whole community. I think talking in relation specifically to Pride, again, I gotta agree with Olga that Pride so often becomes this male-dominated, white-dominated, cisgender-dominated space where being a lesbian, it can be kind of hard to find the right spot for you. So I think working with dedicated spaces for women, with safer spaces for women, is something that's extremely important. And it's also just having women on stage, but also having women booking women, so it doesn't become just men putting women on stages or letting women speak, but actually giving women the decision power and lesbians the decision power in terms of programming and scheduling and these sorts of things. I think is very important.
No, that's it, and I think also thank you for that. I think people forget it's not just on stage; it's backstage. It's the decision making. It's the whole structure, isn't it? That we need more inclusive, visibility, diversity across the board there. But I guess with that, you're kind of coming from all different sized prides, if you like, Helen, you've got Milton Keynes Pride that you're a director for,
Yeah.
Pulse Student Pride, and then Maya, we've talked about World Pride there. Kind of thinking about being more inclusive and creating that representation. How do you kind of make sure that happens? You know, because you're all coming from quite different perspectives with your prides, aren't you? Olga, from student pride perspective, how do you make sure that visibility and that representation is there?
For me, I think it always starts with who actually organizes it. So in my opinion, it's similar with any company, but especially so with Student Pride. In a community, I think it's always a big kind of scale word of mouth. So imagine if your community, if your committee represents every single part of the LGBTQ plus society community, you will have you will make sure that every single person of those representing those groups will make sure to spread the word, to bring people to say what the needs are. Because how can we cater the pride for certain people, for certain marginalized groups, if we don't have any representation within the actual committee, right? So this is our one of our important things that we are working on, and we're always changing and evolving, because the thing is, as you said, sometimes female voices are not heard the same way, or space is dominated by gay men. But the thing is, unfortunately, sometimes it's also because women just don't tend to go for it. Like, there are so many cases when, and it's not the issue with women, it's the issue with the bigger structure, with the way the world works, right? It's the patriarchy, it's just how much we get encouraged, how much from young age, right? So for me, it's just breaking those stereotypes, breaking the kind of like things that don't work, and bringing more people, more female voices in the actual committee. As you said, decision making, that's where it starts. And I think once you have the variety, like the representation within an actual decision-making body, then everything follows. And then you know what strategies to implement, what groups, where to actually find those people who will benefit from this pride. You know, who do we want to, whose voices we want to amplify, because that's what's lacking, I think. And people, as you said, like if bunch of men are bringing female voices to the stage, first of all, they might not create the safest place that it could be, and secondly, they might not be looking in the right places, getting the right voices, you know what I mean? So I think it all starts from the head, you know, like the top. And of course, like understanding social media, how important it is now, because the importance of it over the last year has grown crazily. Like it's you know, it's completely different story now. Like everyone lives there now. So I think understanding what people want to see, how they consume content, how to engage, where to go, like how to create that conversation, that's very important for me as well. So social media and the actual structure of the Pride committee.
Yeah, and like you say, you know, social media, especially, that is particularly with the pandemic. And again, we'll talk about how a lot of events have gone online, but that is crucial to any form of event these days, whether we're physically at an event or not. And it really does have that massive impact, doesn't it? So it is absolutely so important. Maya, what are your thoughts on that, about how we can, you know, create that visibility, even in situations where it's not always there?
Yeah, well, we're working a lot with dedicated spaces for lesbians, but also for women in general, and for non-binary folks, and for genderqueer people. So, for example, we have our Fluid Festival, which is created by women for women. We have, for our Sports Leaders Conference, we'll have a women's caucus. So we're trying to create these sort of safer spaces, dedicated spaces that are specifically for LGBTI women. Sorry. Even the acronym can be difficult for me as well sometimes. So I think it's a lot of the focus on that, like having women in the organization who can organize these things, and well, I mean, the lesbian community is obviously extremely broad, and one woman can't necessarily cater to the whole community, but at least having women who are in charge of making these decisions, I think, is very important to us. And it's very important to us to have a space where women know they can go, which is dedicated to them. So I think that's something we're working a lot on. But then, of course, also representation across the programs. All of our hosts for the Human Rights Conference and the Human Rights Forum in general will be female. So we're just working a lot in general with having a lot of women visible in our program, which I think we're doing fairly well with so far.
Just to touch on that as well then, sorry Helen, before I come over to you, I want to find out, with creating these spaces, you know, specifically more visibility for women, non-binary and queer women, do you feel that will create more allyship from other men, cisgender men, transgender men? But have you noticed a difference even in that? Because when there's more visibility, sometimes it allows, rightly or wrongly, for those people who maybe have taken charge, shall we say, for such a long time, when there's more visibility from other marginalised groups, sometimes it does open that conversation for them to feel like, oh, actually, let me join forces with you, as opposed to that you're trying to take my spot. See what I mean? What's that like?
Well, I think there's always, when you try to create a separatist space, I think there's always, you create a separatist space because there is a need for a space for a certain group. And as with anything else, once there are places where the people in power can't go, they sometimes feel left out and they feel like it isn't fair. So there are, of course, men who thinks that is absolutely unfair that there is a dedicated space for women. But I think it's also something that starts a conversation and that then allows for more allyship once you open that talk. And it's not like we're trying to exclude men in any way. It's just important that there are spaces where women feel safe, and especially in a Pride setting where it is very often very male dominated, and also a lot of cis and white people who dominate everything. It's important to have a space where people can feel safe. So I think once you get into the conversation about it, there definitely is a lot more understanding and a lot more allyship. But there are often people who feel like it's very unfair that they are not the ones who are put in first in line all the time, which is of course difficult when our slogan is "You're included." That we sometimes want to create separatist spaces. But inclusion can of course also mean creating that visibility for groups that don't always get visibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And isn't it ironic, the the people that are taking up all the space and the visibility now demanding more? That's kind of why I'm asking that question. I was interested to see how it is on the other side of that. Helen, with your Milton Keynes Pride, you actually set up, I believe, last year. Is that right? You were one of 3 directors, or did you join?
I was chair of our local LGBT charity, and we did a first event in 2019, and then we've set up a non-profit to run it every year because there is a need in the space. But this is where I get my soapbox out. I'm just going to stand on it. So I never saw myself in prides at all. I felt they were over sexualized. I didn't see myself represented, and what I felt very much was that large parts of our community, we are the teachers, the social workers, we go to work, we have children, we have lives, we have homes, we have all of those things, and none of that is represented in Pride. And it felt that it was very one-way specific. So when I started the first Pride, it was very important to me to have a completely different feel to the event. So we don't do a parade. Companies can't just pay some money to put their logo down a road. That doesn't happen. Companies have to prove why they want to be involved, and it was very important that our day space was very safe. So we have a very family-friendly day. We had fur babies come, we had restrictions around language. Adult time is later on. And so what we tried to do was cater for the day. So the certain element that sometimes come to Prides was fine for the evening. So to be as inclusive as we could, we tried to make sure that everyone had a space in the day where they felt they could attend. And it was absolutely amazing. And we had so many LGBT families come, and it was just so wonderful. And a much higher percentage of lesbian women attend, because it was about, I think there was just a little bit more of an open space. I mean, it's not a huge event, so we can't have necessarily safe spaces. We have to share the space, but it was very much geared at that, you know, to come have a picnic. So why we, you know, it's free. We don't want people not having money, not being able to attend, which in itself has its challenges. But you know, so it was really, really important to me to make sure that because I felt very isolated as a lesbian woman, because I didn't quite often see myself in any of these celebrations. So it was very key for me on a personal level to make sure that that was better. Trying to engage a more diverse committee is incredibly challenging. It's incredibly challenging. And as a director, trying to get representation for more of the group is quite hard. We try to actively seek trans and non-binary artists, you know, artists of colour and things like that, to try and really extend out what we're doing. But it is a challenge, and we do find it hard. So I just apply my social work practice to it, and I just see it. Our form of social activism is about that shared space. It's about education and showcasing the community. 95% of our artists are all from the community. You know, we actively see businesses first and artists first, because this is our day, because we're amazing. So what we try to do is make sure, again, that women are very visible on that. Do you know what I mean? And it's very much that it's more equal. So I think we're good at maybe better lesbian visibility compared to a gay male visibility, but we're not as good as we should be on the other things yet, because it's just not in there. But we're still babies, we're still learning.
Yeah, no, that's it. I mean, thinking about that, then I guess, Olga, what I'll ask you from a social media perspective, because a lot of that I'm assuming will be around demographic as well there, Helen, being like we're Milton Keynes as well, like somewhere more diverse, like London as an example. You've got much more, you know, diversity and visibility across the board. So if that was the situation, Olga, from a social media perspective, how would we, you know, how would you overcome those kind of challenges? You know, you're not quite getting the reach of certain, you know, certain groups within the community, but you've got people attending, but you still want to create that visibility. What would you suggest in that situation?
I think usually, to be honest, I feel like if something is done genuinely, if you really have heart, like the heart is in the right place and doing like that, it's a passion project basically, right? We're not doing this to, you know, profit from it or anything. We do it because there's a need. So for me, everything, social media, not social media, outside, offline, online, everything is about connections. So, and it's not like kind of surface level networking. It's genuine, long, what's it called? Long time partnerships, you know, building those connections that actually matter. So imagine you feel like an organization is not reaching to the audiences that are a certain marginalized group within the community. So I would say find like an account or something where the people are creating that group, that they're already working with people who are of that marginalized community and who maybe don't have the following, or maybe I just don't have the budget and they're small, you know. So make those collaborations. For me, that's what it is, you know. And it is hard work. It is true, as Helen said as well. It's really hard, and I know it from personal experience as well. It is hard to make the group diverse enough, especially if it's already kind of like a little bit disbalanced, you know, from the start. So in my opinion, it's building those relationships. It's going, searching, like actively looking for things, asking people who, where, what, why, who to follow, who to look at, what, when we go back to normal, what concerts to attend, you know, because everything, attention is energy, energy is money, all of these things are connected, you know what I mean? So if you put your energy in the right place, and instead of feeding into I'm not going to say that like I don't enjoy like big celebrations and big prides. I actually do, very much so. But as Helen said about the brands and the logos, like if it's genuine, it's amazing. But if it's not, it's just defeating the purpose, right? So for me, it's everything is genuine connections, whether it is with another little pride somewhere else, or it's within the community, or it's somewhere else, social media, or not online or offline. For me, that's how you reach people, just by building these connections.
Yeah, no, that's it, absolutely. And you know, when you're talking about the bigger brands and stuff, often that's around pink washing, isn't it? You know, very much about just there for the day, but then actually once the flags go back in the cupboard, we never hear or see them again until next Pride, which is a good. But interesting about you're talking about, you know, finances and budgets and capabilities. And, you know, I'm a Pride host myself, and I've been fortunate to host prides like big prides and smaller prides, and I love them all. They're for various reasons. What I noticed is as well, though, you know, obviously, even regardless of necessarily the size, there's a different vibe depending on the type of pride it is, and that's all great as well, because it's all about variety. With Maya, thinking of World Pride, are your hands tied to an extent when you've got these big celebrity, high profile guests and actors? You actually have more to, you know, steer your audience towards who are going to go for that, you know, like the Kylies of the world or the Britney Spears of the world. You know, as I love them myself, but we, you know, stereotypically, a lot of my gay male friends will be screaming at the door, and that's amazing. But it's about, again, who's your audience type? So when you've got these high profile, you know, celebrity acts, is it, you know, does it, the focus quite easily shift to, I have to actually make sure I'm bringing in the audience for this, you know, to justify and support? How does that kind of affect on a larger scale?
Well, I mean, there's no doubt that the big acts bring in a lot of audiences, but I think also since we're doing a World Pride, we're, depending on COVID and all that, we're of course hoping that we will be able to create a lot of spaces that aren't just the big acts. Where, like I said before, we have the Fluid Festival, which is going to be very female dominated. It's going to be all women and non-binary folks and genderqueer people. So we're trying to create these spaces that aren't just for the big acts. But there's no doubt that when you have a license like World Pride, there is a certain expectation, I think, that the big names will also be there. And it's something that, well, Copenhagen Pride has previously been under quite a lot of critique for having cis, white, straight acts on stage instead of hiring someone from the community. So it's something we're very aware of, that we want to make sure we embrace the community and that we have people from the community on our stages. But when you're doing a bigger event, it's of course it's an advantage and a disadvantage that you want to cater to the broader audiences as well. But I'm very happy that we have these smaller spaces where we'll be able to showcase everything within the community. Basically, we also have a venue specifically for youth where there will be DJing as well and these sorts of things. So we're trying very much to create a space for each of the subgroups of the LGBTQI, or not each of the subgroups, that would be very difficult. But to create a lot of different spaces, a lot of different spaces, so everyone can feel included during Copenhagen 2021. Even though we will hopefully also have the big acts, but it is something that's a struggle also at the moment. Of course, is bringing in the big international acts because we don't know who will be able to travel and how they will be able to travel. But again, that also opens a door for having more local acts from the community. So everything is a positive and negative at the moment with COVID.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? I mean, yeah, a lot of changes and a lot of you know, different ways of thinking, I guess, in how we're going to put prides. Obviously, last year all the prides that did go ahead were virtual. You know, and that was great. And again, I was fortunate to host a good number of the prides, and I really, what I noticed, which is what I want to talk to you about, is as well, you know, when we have taken it in mind, you've got a wider reach in many ways. So again, you talk about blessed and cursed. You know, in a lot of respects, you can reach people who maybe for whether it's for physical or disability, they can't travel to the prides because not all prides are accessible. Some people might not be out, they might not be able to, you know, openly be at a pride event. I think, Olga, thinking about that with student pride as well, what I wanted to ask you, student pride, you know, that would have been, when we think about London Pride or Pride in London, you know, often one thing that there is a lot of support for youth, but you with Student Pride, how did it affect like a lot of those young people that couldn't attend those prides? You know, thinking about their first pride coming out and their first time to go, you know, what was the response from that?
It's a really good question, and I just want to say something connected to the previous one as well, about the representation and what Maya was saying. And it's exactly that, it's the balance. Like we tried this year because it was because of virtual aspect of the Student Pride, we were able to have more events and throughout the week, and some were pre-recorded, some were live, and it was a mixture. So it was really, really great to have that. And that allowed us to have smaller kind of, not smaller platforms in terms of reach, but in terms of something that wouldn't have the chance of being done in real life because of the space, you know, the hire, all of these things. But this way, everyone is in their rooms. So we were like able to do, for example, Beyond LGBTQ plus panel that I hosted with my with another volunteer, Reese, who like we did it together. We co-hosted it, and it allowed us to talk to actual community members rather than some big stars, you know. And of course, we had headliners. That's how. That's what is expected from Pride. But we were like able to do these small things like coffee mornings when people would chat like to each other, or networking, just bringing it back to kind of like way of talking in an actual Pride. So that was amazing, and I think that's a big success for this year's Student Pride. I think, you know, I'm really happy that we could do that, and you know, people want to watch somebody who is like them, you know. It's great, it's for visibility, it's amazing if you're like 18-year-old student. And coming back to what you said about first Pride experience and all of like all of those kind of aspects of how it's changed, in my perspective, one, there's a lot of negatives and a lot of positives. So one is travel, right? We do, our Pride always brings people from around the UK and some international students as well. So everyone has to arrange the travel, somewhere to stay, and we help with that, and we provide a lot of help with these kind of things. But it does limit some students, you know. We can't always cater for everyone, and there are a lot of reasons that go into that. So in this way, it was great, you know. Anyone can attend and anyone can watch it anywhere in the world, as long as they have a phone or a laptop, anything, and internet. But with that comes another aspect that I think is very important, which is it's not always safe to watch something like this at home. So on one side, you can be in a very nice privileged position of being happily out, but you can also be in a closet and forced to go back to your home, which doesn't accept you. So that brings my kind of worry about this year, especially to mental health of young students, of students in general, and I mean people, everyone, but especially young queer people, young queer students, because I just can't even imagine what people are going through. They just went to uni, as you said, and they probably just for the first time were able to feel liberated, feel themselves, and then out of nowhere they were forced to go back to something that is not safe, is not true to themselves. So in my opinion, like that's the thing, you know, virtual, is it safer or not? It's a big question. And there is cyber attacks as well. That's a whole different thing, isn't it? If there is no protection put in place, and those like vulnerable students, who, like, it is a vulnerable group, isn't it? They are unfortunately subject to a lot of cyber attacks from just people who are homophobic and just not very nice. So yeah.
That's the problem. Again, like you say, you know, it's like you find one door to, you know, one opportunity to be able to, you know, offer that safe space, but then it comes back with, you know, the homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, the attacks, you know, the abuse on that. I just want to ask, because we are rounding up now, and thank you for that. And you've all been amazing. We could all carry on talking for as long. I love to talk about pride; it's my favourite thing. But what I would like to kind of round up on is, going forward, thinking about, we're still creating visibility, we're still tackling homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, within our own community as well as outside of it, unfortunately. Final kind of, words of wisdom or pearls of wisdom from you all in terms of, as out proud lesbians, what would you suggest, or what would you say to, young queer people who just want to maybe be themselves, about being your true authentic self? I'll throw that over to Helen.
That's because I'm the oldest. See. Basically, well, I mean, normally, because I work with young people quite a lot from the community, and one thing I would always say is, if somebody has a phobic attitude towards you, it's remembering that's about them, not about you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nothing wrong with it, also.
Yeah, no, really, very wise words, isn't it? Thinking about where is that actually coming from. Actually, this isn't about it. And I think that's key, particularly around bullying and making sure that we are resilient to that, and fighting back. So thank you for that. Maya, for yourself.
I think finding communities and finding support groups in your system is extremely important, because once you're part, you feel like you're actually part of the LGBTQI community. Homophobia is still not fun. And it's still out there, but once you have that group of people and you feel like you're part of something bigger, it's a completely different story. So tackling it alone is horrible, and tackling it with a community and a network of other queer people is not as horrible.
Yeah, absolutely. Safety in numbers as well, isn't it? And it's turning that minority into the majority. So thank you for that. And Olga, last but very not least, what did you say?
I really much agree with Helen and Maya, and I just want to add, if you feel like kind of addressing it to those people who might be watching it, if you feel like you are alone, if you feel like what you're feeling is not right, and people keep telling you, you know yourself best, and just being your true self and just believing that you're not alone. There are so many people out there who are your community and are waiting to welcome you, and you do belong. I think if you remember that, and even if it's just a thought, if the reality doesn't align with what you want it to be, I think sometimes it can just get you through really hard moments, because just not giving up on yourself, on things, mental health is so fragile, and it's just having that little thought in your head, even if the world is horrible and cruel, it can change and everything can turn around so much, and you do deserve to be happy, to be loved, to love, and there is hope, and everything is fine in the future. So it's more kind of, yeah.
Thank you. Listen, I thank you both, all of you. It's been great chatting to you, and I just want to say thank you, and carry on being absolute positive role models for our community. It's really important the work you're doing. I wish you all the best of luck. And yeah, continue to support Lesbian Visibility Week, and continue to support queer inclusion within our community and outside of it. Good luck with everything that you do, and I look forward to attending your Pride physically in the near future. So thank you very much. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.